Hello, and welcome to Dawn's Craft Riot. This is my last show for November, folks. I will be taking next Saturday off. We will have, well, I won't be taking it off, but I won't be doing a show for you guys. I'll be back in December, hopefully on the 5th. But until then, for today's show, let's have some techniques. Today I want to do techniques because I'm looking at getting a sort of snowy scene going on. Now, of course, I don't have my information with me. Great. I'm going to use an embossing folder. I'm going to dry emboss some cardstock. This is Cuttlebug, Cricut Cuttlebug Divine Swirl embossing folder. I've managed to leave the packaging somewhere else. The fact that I have the embossing folder today in arm's reach is sort of surprising. It's been one of those days. Just before I turn the camera on, I managed to dump coffee everywhere. So if you're a long-time viewer, you know I have a history of dumping full glasses of fluid everywhere. So this time wasn't quite that bad. All right, I'm looking off to my side and wondering what I'm looking for, but I guess what I need is this machine, the embossing machine. I would zoom out the camera a bit, but at this moment I do not have that ability, so I'm going to start by embossing some paper. I've got cardstock in both blue and white that I'm going to emboss. Like I said at the beginning, this is a technique, so I will not be building a card or a finished project. Oh, come on, words. You get on out of there. I will just be showing you some techniques to get sort of a snowy effect. I happen to have this particular this is the most sort of, to me it's sort of a windy kind of effect because of the swirl, so it's like blowing wind, so I felt that that could work for a winter scene. You may have different things. You may have snowflakes. It'd be great if there was if the embossing folder was all snowflakes. This technique would be super cool and gorgeous. It'll still be super cool and gorgeous. It's just going to be using what I have. So I'm going to just roll these through here. A whole bunch of, well, whole bunch. All of the pieces that I have, I'm going to roll through my Cuttlebug machine. I'm using the right folder for the machine. So I'm just sandwiching this guy. So I've got an A plate, the big thick thing, and two B plates, because this is not thin dies like I'm normally running through here, so I don't need to shim it or use a C plate instead of a B plate. So, oh, it's not lined up exactly straight. That is fine. I'm just gonna squeeze it through. I'm sure most of you know how to do embossing already. And if you don't already know, you likely don't have the machine to do it, but I'm just going to do this a bunch of times because I've got a bunch of paper. So, sorry that this is going to be a little slightly tedious and boring for people who already know how to emboss. And even if you don't, I guess watching this go through several times is not necessarily the most fun thing in the world. But we are in live real time, so, and I really have been just off this, not off, but I've been very busy this week, so I didn't have any time to sit down and do this portion of the program ahead of time. All right. Well, I'm just going to take care to line it up. This one I didn't line up as well, and it's hanging off the edge, which will be fine because these can be cut down later when I'm using them. I'm only going to roll two of the white ones through. I have a few different ideas. They're very similar ideas. It's all going to involve heat embossing on top of this dry embossing, but I'm going to try a couple things. I'm going to put some gesso on one of these white ones so that we can emboss with, or heat emboss with a different, like with not necessarily things you would normally emboss with, like say marker. Some markers are embossable, obviously. Some are made for that, but some of them are just regular water-soluble markers. They're not really water-soluble markers. Markers with water-soluble ink that you wouldn't necessarily be able to, it wouldn't stay wet long enough to stick the embossing powder to it. But if you put gesso down, you can go ahead and use something that you would normally not be able to emboss with because it will stay wet longer. Come on, get out of there. Having a static issue, as we can see, because I'm turning it on its side and it's, there we go. Pardon me. All right, this will be the last one I run through. I think that'll be enough. 3 of the blue and 2 of the white to get a few different, to try a few different color combinations and different inks and such. So roll that through. I don't have it sectioned down, so I'm pressing really hard on top. My table bends a little bit, so the section doesn't want to work. If you have a nice flat table, then and you pull these both down at once, you get a really nice section with this huge pad that's a suction cup. Did I show it, or did I put my hand over it? But if your table bends, it doesn't always necessarily work so well. I'm tucking my handle in. All right, let's go from here. Oh, I've just tucked my embossing folder in between my the plates for the machine, and I realize if I do that, I may not find this embossing folder again until I go to use the machine again next time. Better not put that in there. All right, so let's start by gessoing up this piece because it's going to have to dry. I had everything in place and then had to clean up spilled coffee, so now everything's not in place. Oh wow. Isn't that life some days, guys? I'm just getting my brush that I'm going to use for the gesso. I had it in a jar with water, so now I'm trying to get that water out of there. And now that I think about it, I'm going to need an underneath sheet because I don't want to get my craft mat dirty and have to clean it and all that stuff. It would be fine if I weren't trying to make a video for you guys, so shake up my gesso really well. Oh, it's getting low. And then how am I going to get in here? Let's use a palette knife. I find it really hard to get underneath of this little flap. Anyhow. We are not going to need much gesso, just a little tiny bit. And I think I'm going to put it beside it. Ooh, and that's way more than we need. Way more than we need. Get some in the bristles. I noticed a couple lumps in there too, so maybe try and knock some of those lumps out. Because I've already raised this up, I'm not going to scrape the gesso on, which is how I'd like to apply the gesso, but I've already embossed it because I thought that if I gessoed it first and then embossed it, it would crack the gesso. I don't know if that's true, but that's just the assumption that I made and why I did it this way. So let's just coat this sucker with gesso. I don't want it sticking up really in the, like I want it to very nicely follow the contours of this paper already. So I don't want to use very much. But I do want to coat everything. This gesso is a slightly different color from my paper. You may or may not be able to see in the camera. So I want it all covered. Oh, maybe that was the right amount of gesso. Who knows? Alright, so just try and get it in there evenly. Okay, so that is fully gessoed. and I'm gessoed. So that surface is now going to be sealed and prepared once it dries. So let's just move that well off to the side where I'm sure to either lose it or dump something on it. I'm moving my gesso paper, my parchment paper back. Ooh, gross, a hair. And we will start heat embossing on some of these other ones. So I'm going to start by telling you that I am not particularly good at this, but in this snow case, it will work out fine. I've tried it a couple times now. I've tried this technique, and my best result was this one here, which, as you can see, there's plenty of white that is not just up on these raised bits. I was hoping just to get my embossing up on the raised bits, the dry embossed. I mean, the whole sheet's been dry embossed, but the bits that were popped up when I used the embossing folder. And as you can see, I got way down in the cracks. Now, what I used for this one was the Versamark ink, and my pad is really quite dry. Sort of squeezing the last little bits out of it before I have to clean it, because I did get, as some of you watching know, I got some black ink on there, but I was just using it with not clear embossing powders and it was working fine, but it's almost empty, which is great because it'll make me feel less guilty when I have to wash the whole thing out and start again with new ink. All right. That being said, I think that this being dry is what led to it being on the paper, because I really had to kind of push it down to get it on the paper. If it was really juicy, it might not do that. So to test this theory, I'm going to use some of this Top Boss tinted ink that I have. Now this pad was so super juicy, I don't really use it at all. I've had it for years and years, so I think it is more juicy than the Versamark. It is drying up finally after many, many years of sitting and waiting to be used. So I'm going to try it on this one and see if we can maybe not get it so far down in the cracks. But like I say, like in the in-between space, but for a snowy background, I think it works great. I was making this snowy background and I was trying to think of the different things that you could use, like the different things you could use this kind of background. Oh yeah, this looks like it's working better because it's just sort of catching the tops of those. But I was trying to think of what you could use a snowy background for that wasn't Christmas. And there's lots of things, including a winter birthday. But then I was trying to think that, you know, if I were in, oh, I can see I'm touching the paper already. All right. If I were in, say, Australia right now, we wouldn't need snowy things. So when I was thinking about when it's snowy in Australia, oh, come on, I'm just going to get the white for this one. What kind of holidays are there? And the only holiday I could think of in this summer, and this is weird because I'm not American, was 4th of July. So, I mean, I guess you could make this card in Australia in the summer and give it to someone for the 4th of July, although that sounds like it might be incredibly confusing since I don't know that the 4th of July means anything at all to Australians aside from the fact that it's, you know, the middle of summer. Okay, well, I'm seeing that this is not going to work any better than the previous way. I'm getting little dots of stuff. Maybe my ink is so old as not wanting to be embossing ink anymore. Oops, don't put powder on the backside. What are you doing? Wasting powder. I'm just trying to see if I hit it again if it'll stick any better. So there you go, folks. Not only is it a technique video, it's a possibly not gonna work technique video. Everybody's favorite. Sorry, I've got a lot of white powder going everywhere, and I figure if I pick some of it up and put it back over here, it'll be easier to put away. This is the long waiting process where I put away the powder before we heat set that. I can see that one did not work nearly as well as my original one with the Versamark. So even though we're waiting, it's not even for anything particularly exciting at this point. I think things will pick up though, don't worry about it. I mean, maybe not with this piece, but we'll see what happens after. I might need to run an extra one through the machine. We'll find out. Okay. Pardon me, guys. Sorry about that. Here, let's heat set it and see what happens. Yeah, not as thrilling. Definitely not as exciting as my first one. In fact, I'm going to say let's not even finish heat setting this one. This one's not very pleasant. So sorry to start with not super pleasant one. Okay, well, what we learned from that is old ink. Don't use it. Number 2. So I'm going to use this because I did ink on this side previous. Take 2, start again. I'm going to use the Versamark. Now, I can see that this is definitely hitting down in between, oh, especially over there. But it's going to be for sure sticky, so I know we'll get something stuck down. Will it be where we want? Hopefully mostly. So I think the key, if you really want this to just stick on the tops, is to have a juicy ink pad, possibly a small ink pad, like a cat's eye, so that you can really control it. And a thick embossing line. If you, I should let you know that I'm using a different color of embossing powder right now. I've switched to clear embossing powder with a blue, what do they call that? Sheen to it? A blue iridescence? One of the harder parts of this technique is getting the embossing powder off of the other parts. And I can see this is wanting to stick to both. Guys, I really did try this before I showed it to you, and still I can't make it. I can't replicate what I did. So isn't that wonderful? What a strange, strange time. Oh, it's one of those days you just want to cry. Because look, it just won't come off of anywhere except for that. Like, it won't come off of any parts. It's stuck to every part of this card, and I'm really whacking it. That sounds rude, but I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to explain what I'm doing. Hello. Welcome to my technique video where none of the techniques work. I'm working on a snow technique, and so far I haven't been able to replicate what I managed to do when I wasn't on camera. So I'm going to heat set this anyways. And then I'm going to try it again. This is actually quite pretty. It's not what I was hoping for. So let's say today's episode is more about how not to give up hope. It's hard to tell if I've heat set everything because there's so much powder. I can't tell what's the paper and what's powder. Oh, I missed some. Alright, I think I got it. I think everything that is embossed is now embossed. Strange time. Strange days. Alright, so this is what I ended up with. It's super cool. I'm totally into it. It's really not what I was attempting. Again, I'll show you what I did when nobody was looking. This is what we achieved previous. So I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try it one more time. I'm going to go in with, oh wait, now I'm having a brainstorm. This might actually end up looking kind of amazing on this piece, even if we do get all kinds of embossing way down in the cracks. So I'm going to just chuck this clear embossing powder with the blue sheen back into a container. I'll set that paper aside. And I'm going to see if I do have a little cat's eye ink, because this might help me to put the ink where I want it to go. That's right. If it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, keep persevering. Okay, I have a little stack here that's got a gray. Oh, a gray might actually be nice. And a little colonial blue, which is sort of purple, but it also might work nicely. Let's see. Oh, and here's a chalk blue that might, since I'm trying to go for a sort of winter look, maybe that chalk blue would be good. I think the colonial blue is a bit more, it's sort of periwinkle almost. It's really hard to, I'm just going to go with this one. First I'm going to see if it's got any juice to it. Oh, and apparently it doesn't have very much juice at all. All right, well then definitely not that one. And that one doesn't want to ink either. Oh, good grief. Really? Really, really, really. Okay, I'm going to go back to the Versamark because, like I say, I think it'll be fine even if we do get it stuck way down. I'm going to use my cornstarch pad. Got cornstarch, it's not really a pad, cornstarch in a bag. I'm going to try and use that to avoid some of whatever we had going on before where there was a lot of embossing powder stuffed down. So there, now that's good and dusty. I just gave it a flick with my finger on the side so there's not a whole cloud of dust to be pouring back into my embossing powder container. All right, I'm going to put on the inky side. I'm going to cross my fingers. I'm going to hold it down and I'm going to try and ink up those sticking up points. I see that I got ink down on the paper, just like before, but I mean, it doesn't really matter what I see. What matters is what we end up with, which might end up being, again, a whole fully embossed thing. We'll find out. Keep on breathing. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. And this, of course, looks like it's stuck down to the middle part, too. Oh, you guys. I'll set it aside while I put my embossing powder back. I'm not going to panic. No point in that. I do have some really neat embossing powders I'd like to try if I can get this to even remotely work. After we heat set this one, we're gonna go to the one that we've gessoed earlier and see what we can do there. Hello. I'm just making backgrounds today. Attempting a technique and having it fail on me, you know. So far. I have had success, but just not on camera. I'm actually liking how this one turned out. Oh, hooray! I hope you're having an excellent day. Thanks for popping in. Well, I actually really like how this one turned out. Even though, again, it's not turning out exactly the way that I was hoping for. So I'll show you the one that is my goal. This is the one that I made off camera when I was attempting this. So I figured I could show you how to do that. But apparently I can't recreate that technique to save my life. But I really like how this one turned out. So even though it's still embossing down in between, I've put powder down before I put my my ink and my embossing powder, and I'm still having issues. But I'm just trying different ways of doing this. So this time was with Versamark ink and white embossing powder. Yeah, I think so too. I think it turned out quite pretty. And I think this doesn't necessarily have to be a wintry card. This could be a brain work wedding card, a wedding or an anniversary or something. And I think it also might be fun if we come back in fact, let's just go ahead and do this while I've got it out, and then I'll might as well check the idea I have and see if it works. Then I'll move on to the gesso piece. What if we took some ink and just added some ink to it? So I want just a blue pad. Now this, of course, will take away the, well, I guess you could use it for a wedding even if it does have blue. I think I'm going to use my lightest blue. Yeah, wedding card that would work great for, I think, as a background. But my intent, that's the word I'm looking for, was to get a very snowy feel. So I think maybe adding in some really light blue will give it a winter snowy feel. And then we'll come back through and just wipe it off of the embossing powder. With a little bit of water, it'll come off of the areas of embossing powder, and then they'll show up again. I'm just trying to help people with ideas of how to make their winter cards look snowy. Because that was the issue that I was having. I think I'm going to go over the whole thing with this and then come back in. Squeak goes my chair. Listen, pushing little bits of Velcro into my paper. Oops. Apparently I didn't have my foam lined up. Alright, so let's take actually this paper towel that I dried my brush off on will work. I was trying to do a winter card without having, like, I don't have a whole lot of winter paper. Alright, so this way it just takes off the ink that was on the embossing powder, which is clear with a blue sheen to it. So now that's a, sort of a real wintry feel for a background. Hooray! My fail turned into a win. I love that. That's one of my favorite backgrounds I think I've ever made. Hooray! Alright, so let's go to the gesso-y one. So this one is just white cardstock, and I've painted it with gesso because I wanted it to be, I wanted to be able to emboss with something other than embossing ink. I mean, I am actually going to use the Distress ink, which is technically an ink that you can use for embossing, but I find when you're doing a large piece, sometimes a Distress ink will absorb into the dry paper really quickly and not be still wet when you want to emboss on it. Man, sometimes those words have a hard time coming out. So I'm going to emboss this one clear, because I'm going to use Salty Ocean. Now, you could use, oh, I'm hoping that the gesso didn't knock down some of these bumps, but you could also use like a Crayola watercolor marker or any kind of watercolor marker. I say Crayola just because that's my top brand of, like, in my mind, of student, you know, markers that everyone might have. But any watercolor marker now, once you have gesso, will emboss. So you could hit the tops of these with a marker, but I'm going to use just the pad of embossing ink. And again, I'm just trying to hit those swirls. This is maybe working a little bit better. Although I am still getting it underneath, as you can clearly see. I think, again, the best way to use this technique is to have like a really thick line of dry emboss. So if you had something that was embossing in big, like chevrons or something, you might have a nice big pattern that you could basically knock ink onto the tops of. Hey, being a novice is where everybody has to start at. Everybody who's ever done anything has been a novice at it, so I really like simple techniques. If you watch my show, you will find that I often do simple techniques, but I think it's fun to use your products in different ways, if you can. So, all right. I think I prefer the blue paper with the white to the white with the blue, but we'll hit it with the heat tool and see what happens. I think this looks a little bit more like ocean waves to me. So don't burn your fingers. And anywhere there's ink, that embossing powder will have stuck to it. So it should sort of pop. The colors will start to pop. The colors. Here's one color. The blue will start to pop. You can really stretch your dollar if you are using your tools and products in many ways. Stretch my mind too if I have to think and say words. This is actually quite pretty in real life. I'll hold it up to the camera so you can get a better look of it here in a second, but this blue is very pretty under the clear. And often I do like a full card or something on the show, but today I'm just showing the techniques. So I quite like this one. Anyhow, I could just sit here all day, wiggle this piece back and forth. So that was on top of gesso. So that means, like, I mean, if you put gesso down and you put down, like, you just took a regular marker and just wrote, then you could emboss the thing that you wrote. As long as you use like a marker. A pen would work too, but you get the exact line of the pen, so it'd be thin. So yeah, I really like this one too. So as much as I was really starting to panic, the first one I did today did not work out at all. We ended up with this to the extent that I stopped embossing it, and I think I might throw away this pad or really clean it out and put something else in it. Like glycerin, which I've heard that you can use glycerin just from the brain. Don't you do this to me, brain? From the drugstore, from the pharmacy, you can buy just plain glycerin and you can use it as an embossing ink. So I think I might save this pad and clean it out and use it to put glycerin in. But so we had the first one, which was a complete fail. Then we did this one next, which really sort of embossed down inside as well. Then that's the same, that's the clear embossing. This is the clear embossing with the blue sheen. This is the clear embossing with the blue sheen. You have the same pad. Cool. I got this pad 15, 20 years hence. So long ago. That's why it's no longer working for me. I tried to use it and it didn't want to emboss today. So I think that it lost its stickiness after so many years. Now that I finally have a clue what to do with it. But I'm a slow starter, let me say that. All right, let's just do one more. Let's just do one more for fun. I've got this one. And I think I am going to go ahead and try it with glycerin and see if that works really well as embossing powder. I've seen other people do that, so I think that it is a viable option, I guess is what I'm looking for. All right, one more go. One more. I'm going to use? What will I use? Let's use Winter Ice. This is a combination. This is an embossing powder called Winter Ice. It's from it's Studio K brand, which I got from a shop in Aldergrove, Scrap and Stamp, but I don't think they live. I don't think that they exist anymore, but I'm pretty sure that it's like a rainbow glitter with a clear and a white. So maybe in future I can mix up my own because I do have a clear with a rainbow glitter going on. There we go. Actually, that might be really pretty. I wonder if the white and no, we're going to use this one. It has white in it. It might make it look a bit weird, but this is the whole point of this, is to try it out. So let's just try it out. I'm not going to talk myself out of it. We're just going to do it. Oh dear. I'm going to use the Versamark, even though my pad needs re-inking. And I can see I'm getting the ink down in between the grooves. That's just how I do it, apparently. And like I keep saying about this project, mostly to reassure myself, it's okay. It's wintry, it's snowy, it's okay if there's stuff in the background. Snow does not behave the way that you want it to behave. It does what it wants. Yes, rainbow glitter, completely standard. Actually, I was looking through my speaking of standard things that I've found out I don't have. I do have rainbow glitter, but what I don't have is just regular gold embossing. So I have gold with tinsel, but I don't have regular gold embossing. So looks like I need to top up my embossing powders drawer. Actually, I have a friend who recently purchased some, like a whole set of not used, but like a whole set of stamp stuff that a lady was no longer using. All right, look at that. It's solid. I'm going to tap this on the back a while we chat. So my friend has a whole bunch of interesting embossing powders, and I think maybe more of each than she would use, so I wonder if she'll trade me some of mine for some of hers. Yeah, good grief. Really can't get the embossing right today to save my life, but that's okay. These are going to be backgrounds anyway, so it really doesn't even matter that much. I'm going to set this aside and go ahead and dump this back into the container. I think it makes a difference as to what kind of pad you're scraping over there. 2 gold embossing powders, but you don't use them very often. Yeah, I'm more of a silver than a gold fan myself, or an iridescent or a sparkle or something. But I was just thinking Christmas cards and wishing I had a true, just a gold without a tinsel or whatever in it. Oh well. I'm happy that I have black and white embossing powder now, which I never had either of those, and they work great, so definitely not complaining. All right, let's hit this with the heat tool and see if it's viable or if it's terrible. Anyhow, this is just you know, like ideas of what to do and what not to do, how to make yourself a background. Good grease. Good grease. Good grief, that used a lot of powder. I can't believe how much stuck down to the middle of this thing. Luckily, I have an idea of how to mix my own. Yeah, clear embossing powder is super handy, for sure. I love to use clear embossing powder to do resists. But it's super handy for lots of things, definitely. All right, well, that certainly did not work as I had planned, as you all know. But it actually still is pretty cool. Bright embossing powders. Oh, neat. Lindy's bright embossing powders. Well, that sounds fun. If you do figure out how to use them, let me know. Or like if you... I want to know. I want to see what you're all doing with your embossing powders. All right, so like I say, this did not turn out exactly the way that I had planned for it. It definitely embossed much more than I thought it was going to. All of this stuff should not have been hit with the ink. I think maybe having the sponge pad makes a difference. I think that, you know, maybe having it dry so I had to press it down more makes a difference. But I think this is still pretty and usable. So I'm going to call it a win. I'm going to call this whole thing a win. Oh, and also I wonder if we could... Oh, I might tear that up with... Yeah, if there's little bits of glitter in there, you might not want to use your pad. Because A, you might get glitter in your pad, and B, you might tear your pad up. All right, well, here's another lesson for you. Don't tear up your blending foams with glitter. Yeah, no, it's definitely usable, and I love that rainbow sparkle. I feel like there should be a unicorn on the middle of that, but okay, that's a story for another day. Let's put up the different backgrounds that we did do. We did do them. They're mostly white, which I guess snow was mostly white, so it worked out all right. That's my little example from before. So there you go. There are some examples of what to do and what not to do, how you could possibly get a snowy type effect using an embossing folder and embossing powders and heat and stickiness, and what you can do with some gesso, because gesso is amazing. I really like this one. I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that this technique has been of some help to you, and that... Oh, a dark and stormy card. Oh yes, dark and stormy. Very cool. Good ideas, guys. Keep them coming, because I've got to do something with all of these. Well, I don't have to, but I'm going to. Definitely got some wintry ones going on too. But anyhow, yes, thanks again for being here. Like I say, there's no more November shows for me. I'm a busy gal till the end of November. Well, I don't know when I'm busy till, but I'm definitely busy next week. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here. And I will be back in December, hopefully on the 5th. And I probably have some sort of winter or Christmas or who knows what project for you that day. Until then, take care, guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.